for pulling all this together. As you know, Karam's on my team, and he's just done an amazing job this week. Karam is someone that knows how to apply pressure. And I think some of you have probably experienced that, but I'm up here today because I happened to be buying fruit at the fruit stand a couple weeks ago, and Karam approached with a posse, and she's like, "So, I hear you do comedy." You know, and she said, and I'm like, "Well, I've done improv, I've done a few things," and so she's like, "Well, you're going to perform at the Multicultural Day, right?" You know, and of course she's got 5 people there, standing witness. So I was, you know, so I had no choice but to be up here, but I'm glad to be here today. So I've been struggling with what to do because I haven't done comedy in a long time. I usually do improv, which is, you know, a group of people improvising on an idea, which you don't want to watch one person doing that. It's unfortunate. But, you know, so I was struggling. I was working on some comedy bits. I was pitching them to my wife, and my wife was saying, "Well, don't quit your day job." And I explained to her what I was doing this for, and she's like, you know, she looked at me for a moment. She's like, "Well, don't get fired." So hopefully this is going to work out. So wanted to spend a little time on a story instead, just to give you a little sense of who I am. You know, I grew up in Illinois. You know, Illinois is what they call the California of the Midwest. But you know, and I grew up, you know, as a fairly geeky child. You know, I was a nerd. You know, I ended up having my lunch money taken from me a lot. I grew up in a fairly poor family. My dad used to cut my hair, which is not something you want to have happen. But you know, he was very excited to be able to save money in this way. So you know, he was always trying to stretch a dollar. So you know, every 4 or 5 weeks or so, he would sit me down in the kitchen on a chair and, you know, get out the bowl and just trim around. And then at one point, this was back in the 20th century when all technology sucked. But at one point, he bought this device called a Flowbee. Does anyone know what a Flowbee is? I know you know, because it looks like you did your hair with the Flowbee this morning. So a Flowbee is a combination vacuum / hair cutting device. So it's kind of all purpose. And he convinced my mom that this is something he needed to purchase to use on my hair. And he was so excited with the results that he wanted to try it on my younger sister's hair as well. And at that point, the Flowbee got thrown out of the house. So. You know, and the other thing people don't tend to know about me, but glad to share with you all, so you can experience this with me. Is that, you know, I grew up with ADD, so you know it's something that I've managed my whole life, and you know it's something. You know, first of all, people say to me, "So you're a program manager on a large, complex program that requires a ton of organizational skills, and you have ADD." And I was like, "Well, how does that work out for you?" And generally the answer is not very well. I'm kidding though, but you know, what's interesting is that you know, when I was growing up, the idea of ADD really hadn't been, you know, the diagnosis really hadn't been introduced yet. You know, so I was just an obnoxious child. Or precocious, depending on the mood of my parents that day. So I grew up in Illinois, and then when I was 17 or 18, well, actually earlier than that, when I was 12 or 13, my family moved to Mississippi. For those of you, who've spent a lot of time in the Midwest and the South, know that was a bit of a culture shock, right? So Mississippi is kind of like angry Illinois, right? There's a lot of suspicion towards a Yankee, and what I did to get by was be funny. I spent a lot of time telling jokes, making people laugh, because otherwise, I was just the damn Yankee in the room. And we lived there for a couple years, and I struggled through school and got into high school, and then we moved to Louisiana. And Louisiana is like Mississippi, except with the French accent and alcohol. Went to high school in Louisiana, and Louisiana is really where I first discovered my purpose in life. And my purpose in life was Celeste. I met Celeste in my junior year of high school, and she was beautiful. She was talented, she was smart, she was rich, and she was completely unattainable to someone like me. I had no hope. But the amazing thing was that I made her laugh. She thought I was a funny person. Which I thought I was too, but that's sort of beside the point. So over time, we had conversations, and I made her laugh, and I finally, after a year there, the second year I was in high school there, I was 17, I worked up my nerve to ask her out on a date. And she said yes. And the skies parted, and the sun shone down on me, and I was just in the clouds for several days, working up to the night of the date. We were set to go out on a date on Friday night, and I was getting all set up. So this is August. This is August. It was the beginning of the school year in Louisiana, and it was hot and humid. And so I'm getting ready. It's a Friday night, and I'm getting in all to my best clothes, which included a pair of slacks and a wool blazer. So the thing you want to know is you don't want to wear a wool blazer in Louisiana in August. And then about 5 o'clock it started raining. And it started raining a lot, as it often does in Louisiana. It was raining cats and dogs, and I have the French translation for you here. It's Il pleut de cordes. It's raining cats and dogs in French. So now you know what people in Louisiana say when it's raining cats and dogs. My parents tried to convince me not to go on the date, but I, no, right? I was not going to not go on the date. This was my one chance for happiness in life. So I, convinced them that I must go. And I got into the 1980 Cutlass Sierra that my dad drove. For those of you who aren't familiar with 20th century vehicles, a Cutlass Sierra is essentially 3 cereal boxes taped together and painted brown. And so she lived in the country on what I thought was an estate. It was just a big house at the time, but I had no sense of scale. So I'm driving out, and it's raining and it's pouring, and I was late, so I'm speeding like a 17-year-old in their father's car often speeds, going too fast on the road. And it's like, what could go wrong? So I came around this curve, and I took the curve too fast, right? And I lose control of the car, and the car flies over the drainage ditch, through the barbed wire fence, into the middle of this cow pasture. Now, for those of you in the room who are concerned about such things, no cows were harmed in the making of this story. So I come to a stop in the middle of the pasture. The car is in the mud up to its axles, and I open the door to get out. I'm unscathed, thankfully. I opened the door to get out, and a herd of cows is racing away from the car. Trying to get away from this intruder in the middle of the field. And at that point I'm like, what do I do? Well, I start pushing the car, and of course the car is going nowhere. So I sit there, and of course I don't have a mobile phone, because of course we're in the 20th century where technology sucks, right? So no mobile phone to make a call. So after a few minutes of sitting there wondering, I see this tractor coming down the road in the rain. And it's the owner of the farm with his tractor. He gets out of the car, he looks at me with this huge grin on his face. I imagine that he still tells this story at family dinners about pulling the guy in the wet wool blazer with the Cutlass Sierra out of his cow pasture. So he ties the tractor to my car, pulls it out, gets it back onto the road, but of course it still won't start. So I get on the tractor with him and ride back to his house. Now at his house, I meet him and his wife, and it's very dark. I mean, it's an old farmhouse. I mean, it's a gothic dark. It's like, it's like horror movie dark inside. But I'm appreciating what they've offered me, and I get to the phone. They offer me the phone, and the guy says to me again, he's like, well, don't take a lot of time on the phone because it's long distance, right? And again, technology in the 20th century sucked, right? So it was 25 cents for a minute, right? So I pick up the phone and I look up, and right above the phone there is a cross with Christ on it. So obviously they're Catholics, but I have Jesus Christ looking down on me from the cross, judging me for destroying my parents' car, while I'm speaking to my dad and asking for him to come pick me up. So they come and pick me up. It's the silent ride home with Dad that we've all experienced, or maybe we've all experienced. It's the silent ride home with Dad, and I get home. My mom gives me a big hug, and she says, Celeste called. She was wondering where you were. I told her you were stuck in a cow pasture. I'm like, thanks, Mom. Thanks. So I gave Celeste, I gave Celeste a call, and it was like, well, don't think I'm going to be able to make it tonight, we agreed we would connect at school next week. So I never had that date. And I realized, I realized as I was putting this story together to tell to you that that's kind of a metaphor for a lot of things that have happened in my life, and that's really sad. But I don't want to leave you on a sad note, so I looked up Celeste. As I was putting together the story, I looked her up online. I was not stalking her, not stalking. I looked her up online to see what she was doing, and she's actually a corporate attorney, and she defended BP in the Deepwater Horizon case. So I'm like, well, thank God I did not get involved with her. And I think the last thing I would say is that, it didn't work out, but I met a wonderful woman. I just sent a son to college, and that was challenging as those things can be. But I get to come to work every day and spend time with you people, and have a wonderful time. So the fact that I ended up in a cow field had very little impact on the joy I have had in my life. Thank you.